Good afternoon, everyone, if you're on the East Coast, or good morning if you're on the West Coast. My name is Becky Robinson. I'm the founder and CEO of Weaving Influence, and I am so thrilled that you've decided to join us today for the Daily Connection. Just a quick note, we are not able to broadcast live on Facebook today. We had a little bit of a glitch. So in the event that you recommended to someone that they catch us there, you may want to give them this Zoom meeting link. They did not need to register, and they can come on over and join us today live for the Daily Connection. And I'm here with my old friend, Flip Brown, and I say old because I've known him a long time, and that's the only reason. Welcome, Flip.
Thank you, Becky. Well, I do have the magnet on my refrigerator that says I may be old, but at least I got to see all the cool bands.
Which ones have you seen?
Oh, don't get me started. It's more or less who didn't I see? So I only saw the Grateful Dead 15 times, and I only saw Eric Clapton 8 times. So
holy cow. So if there's anyone on the call who saw either the Grateful Dead or Eric Clapton, go ahead and tell us that in the chat. We do want to invite you to use the chat throughout today's broadcast, and we would request, as we always do, that you select the drop-down menu and post to all panelists and attendees so everyone can engage and communicate together. So if you could take a quick moment to find the chat, I'm going to use today's daily prompt, which is the same prompt we've been using throughout the series. What are you grateful for today? So I have a silly one. My silly grateful thing today is that last night I was making some smoothies with my daughter, and I thought we were all out of frozen fruit. And then when I dug a little deeper, we have plenty of frozen fruit. So I'm grateful for the great shopping that my husband and I did to prepare for this pandemic, and that we have plenty of fruit for smoothies. Flip, what are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for having extra time with my wonderful wife, and secondarily, I get more time to play music, although I can't play with my buddies yet, but we're trying to figure out how to do that online.
Oh yeah, I bet you could. Well, thanks to those of you who are answering. It looks like we have a couple of people on the call who have seen both Eric Clapton and the Grateful Dead several times, so you are not alone in your love for music. John's saying Moody Blues open for the Beach Boys, so maybe he saw them there. Michael is grateful for rains. We're grateful for sunshine, reliable power, Meals on Wheels, bundt cakes, yum. Stargazer lilies for life. And Jeff wants to know if iron butterfly counts. I don't even know what iron butterfly is.
Inagata Vita, yeah.
All right. Well, Jeff knows more than I do. So glad you're all here today. It's great to be with you again. Let me really quickly introduce you to Flip Brown. So Flip is the founder of Business Culture Consultants and the author of a book called Balance Effectiveness at Work: How to Enjoy the Fruits of Your Labor Without Driving Yourself Nuts. A side note on that, Flip and I have previously done 2 webinars together. They should both be on our Weaving Influence YouTube channel. So I know you're going to love Flip. You're going to want to learn more from him. And I encourage you to go over to our YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe, and then go find those old webinars with Flip. And I'd be curious. I'm always curious about how my hair looks on the webinars. So if you have a chance to go look for those old Flip webinars, you can tell me how if Flip and I were having a good hair day on those other webinars. So sorry, that was a very silly diversion. Flip lives in Burlington, Vermont, and loves his job when he has one. So let's jump in. So the title of today's session is How to Freak Out with Style and Grace: Strategies for Everyday Sanity. Flip, why did you choose this title?
Well, it's sort of a yin-yang approach in that, yeah, freaking out, of course, can mean that we're losing it, we're overwhelmed, we don't know how to cope, but it actually has, a historical meaning in terms of, wow, man, I got the new Pink Floyd album. I put my headphones on. It was so good. I was just freaking out. So it can be an expression of expansion or contraction. So that's why I chose it.
That's awesome. So
Well, we're having some bandwidth issues, Becky, because you're frozen, and that was a little garbled. thinking that you asked me the second question, is what in my background is relevant. Well, at one point, I actually worked as a crisis clinician. I worked on the mobile crisis team at our community mental health center. And so when you learn how to deal compassionately with acutely suicidal and psychotic people on a daily basis, it gives you a deep respect for what I would call other or everyday crises. So this situation that we're in is certainly extraordinary, and there are ways to move through these situations, these crises, to get to the other side. And I've also had some significant personal losses of significant impact. And when I was young and not very smart, I had a personal bankruptcy. So surfed a lot of waves of change and discomfort.
Well, I'm sorry that you have endured some difficult things in your life, but I'm glad that you're willing to share your insights with us, to give us some ideas about how to stay sane every day. So, what are some helpful things to understand about ourselves and others during this time?
Well, I think that everyone is on their own roller coaster. And what I mean by that is that we relate to these sorts of stressful situations in different ways at different times, in a different pace. And so, I might be fine, but somebody I care about can be really stressed out, or vice versa. And I think that because of the amount of significant uncertainty, it's different than, let's say you have a family member who's not expected to live, and you get a chance to plan and say goodbye. Well, there is no defined endpoint here. There's no sense of how we're going to all emerge. I'm hopeful that some significant things will change for the positive, but that's unknown. So I think it's important to have compassion for ourselves, everyone we care about, and our communities.
That's really helpful. And I typed in the chat, Flip, everyone has their own roller coaster. And I love that. We are all experiencing some waves and challenging situations, some of us more than others, some days more than others. And if we can approach each other with compassion and also apply that compassion to ourselves. So, Flip, how would we know if we're freaking out too much?
Well, I think that if we are isolating, if we are numbing out, alcohol sales are way up. Some of that is for medicinal purposes, but some of that may be, to use a little bit of jargon, some of that may be a maladaptive coping response. So we want to make sure that we stay in connection, because if we're getting feedback from others that we're freaking out too much, that we're completely overwhelmed, that we're snapping and barking and biting at the people that we care about, it's important to pay attention to those signals. And yet you could also go in the other direction and be in total denial, or you could be, too optimistic or kind of just numb. So it's an interesting time in terms of how do you balance the reality of what's happening, both for you, for your family, and for the society at large, without being completely swept away with anxiety, dread, and fear.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And we're all seeking that balance. I know for me, I'm still working a pretty regular schedule, and there's this compartmentalization that has to take place of like, I'm going to shut out all the worry and concern in order to deal with what's in front of me right now. But it's important to remember that we can't completely live in denial of what's really happening in the world. So I'm curious, Flip, for you, what are your top 3 strategies for everyday sanity? And I want to also at this point invite people in the chat to share yours. If you have any coping strategies, I'd love to know what your top 3 are. And I'm going to presume today, Flip, to share mine too, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Why don't you share yours? I'll share mine. And those of you in the chat can also share your top 3. So you first.
Well, I think it's important to carve out personal time to simply be still. And whether that's meditation or yoga or picking up a guitar or simply going for a walk, it's really important to carve out that time so that you can recenter, because the temptation is to just get swept along by the chaos. Another strategy for me is to make sure that I don't stuff myself with too much news. So I had to put myself on a news diet. Check it once in the morning, once in the middle of the day, and once around dinner time, but not before I go to bed. There's no point in reading the news before I go to sleep. Um, Another coping strategy is making sure I get out in nature, because there's actually research that shows that it has a calming effect neurologically on us to be in nature. And then the last is humor. There are some incredible YouTube videos using music making and parodies of the coronavirus, and a lot of memes out there. I saw one the other day of a guy standing in a field with a set of bagpipes, and the caption read, "Social distancing tool." So it's just important to see the light side of this, even though it can be pretty heavy.
So that's a lot of amazing suggestions, and we have a lot in the chat that are echoing your sentiments about, getting in nature, taking quiet time, staying away from the news. I love the suggestion from Angie, adult coloring pages, making contact with friends via Zoom. So all kinds of amazing suggestions. So I'm going to share one quick hack that's made a difference in my week. I just started this on Monday morning. I made on my iPhone in the notes a list of a morning routine, which includes me being in my seat by 7:30 to start my workday, and then also a list of evening routine items. And I'm not taking like a super legalistic approach to it. I'm attempting to give myself grace with it, but I have found that having a roadmap to my morning and a roadmap to my evening is helping me to stay more focused and sane. And it's a mix of things I enjoy, like my evening list includes a 1-mile walk with my daughter and my dog. My morning routine includes either exercising first thing or showering first thing, but either one gets me going and not scrolling Facebook, for an hour, which is a black hole that we can all fall into. So I'll just share that one. That's made a
Mm-hmm.
huge difference for me this week in terms of my sanity. So let's talk about how we should know if we need extra support. So
Mm-hmm.
how would we know if we should be seeking out our family, our peers, a coach, a counselor? What would be some signs?
Sure. Well, I think that the interesting thing about family, particularly when we're often cooped up now, because there's a country western song that goes, "I only like half the people I love." And sometimes that's true when we're all stressed out. I think that family can be a source of support, but I think sometimes we need some space from family because of just, again, the dynamics of the closeness. Peers, I think, in order to access our peers, we need to have what I call appropriate vulnerability. And particularly workplace peers, it's important to be able to connect and share about what's going on without making it an inadvertent psychotherapy session. Then I think mentors are the people, and it used to be mentors were always older, but now mentors can actually be younger than us. And technology has proven that over and over. Mentors are people who simply share their wisdom with us with no expectation in return. And we can also look for opportunities that by being a mentor, we're in a service mode, and that can lighten our burden. The difference between a coach and a counselor is important, because to me, a coach, like in the sports metaphor, is simply helping you play the game better, whereas a counselor is more like a physical therapist, someone who's helping you return to wholeness. So if this stress is such that it's activating some issues around anxiety, depression, substance abuse. We now have this model of telehealth where you can get some private confidential counseling without leaving your home if you have a private space. So it's important to have that full circle of support if you need it.
That's really helpful. So let's go back to this idea of the positive usage of the word freaking out. I was intrigued by that. I think that I'm not quite the musician that you are with your guitars and such, but I do enjoy music and find that it helps me to focus in different ways. So let's talk some more about that positive usage of the term freaking out. And I'm curious if anyone on the call has ever used that term in a positive way. If you have, please tell me. I'm curious.
Well, I'm freaking out about how much time I have because I used to travel a lot, and I'm not traveling at all. I've got time, time as a gift, time as a luxury, and sometimes time as just like whoa, what do I do now? So I'm freaking out about how much time I have that I haven't had before. I'm also freaking out in that I don't know if my previous model of business is going to be applicable in whatever the new normal looks like. And so I have some different ideas about how to reconfigure my business. On a bad day, which doesn't happen very often, I'm freaking out negatively, but on a positive day, I'm freaking out because, oh my gosh, look at the choices and the possibilities I have. And I'm very fortunate to be in that place of having the mortgage paid off, very low overhead, no car payment, and many people are not in that position. So I'm also freaking out about the privilege I have and the resources that I have. It's pretty amazing.
That's helpful. Thank you so much. It's so funny. I don't know why it struck me that I couldn't think about using the term in a positive way, because now, like, oh, I gave this gift to my kid and she completely freaked out. Like, of course I get that. So I'm a little bit thick today. So let me think. What else do you want to say about this, Flip?
Well, I just want to acknowledge that we are all trying to make sense out of this from an existential or even spiritual perspective in terms of, to specifically quote Mr. John Lennon, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And all of us had plans for 2020. We all thought we had a reasonable sense of how our lives and our businesses and our kids' schools and everything was going to continue to evolve and change. And now there's this really kind of mind-blowing incident, this pandemic. And yeah, we can do the coulda, shoulda, woulda, but now we have to deal with the reality of it. And it's challenging us to see ourselves and our relationships and our work in different ways. I hope that in the end, that's not a bad thing. My business is a certified B Corp. I belong to a couple of progressive business organizations, Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility and the Social Venture Network. And there's a hope that there will be a larger safety net, that we will reduce the inequalities in our society, and that we will have a more compassionate and caring shared sense of values moving forward. Now, it could go the other direction, and the pessimist might say that that is a likely outcome, but I'm not putting energy into that. I'm putting energy into the changes that I would like to see, and the places where I can make a difference. For example, right now, if someone did want to hire me, there's no way I would charge them my normal commercial rate. I would use a method from one of my mentors in terms of, you can pay from the heart. What does your heart say would be something that you would feel comfortable about in terms of making a contribution to my business so I can move forward, and I can make a contribution to your business so we can move forward, so you can move forward. And so that's a completely different way of doing business. And I hope other ways of doing business will emerge.
Wow, I love that phrase, pay from the heart. And I'm intrigued by how that might work. So if you have the opportunity to charge your work in that way, I would love to hear that. You know, I feel you on that, Flip, because we're definitely in a position in our business where, you know, all the old pricing is out the window. You know, if you want to hire us for anything, we want to work with you, because your goal is to keep working. My goal is to keep my team working.
Right.
So that definitely causes us to be innovative. I'm personally curious about, you know, what ways we might learn about how to do business better when we have these constraints that we never had before. And Jeff is commenting in the chat, Flip, that he appreciates and shares your hope that something better will emerge from this. You know, I hope that we'll all pay attention and notice and recognize and celebrate the good changes that come about in the world as a result of this, whether it's, you know, at the micro level, like with our families, or whether it's broader scale. I hope we'll all see those things. But I need to take a note on that. Pay from the heart.
Well, and I'll share a little humor with you. And I didn't make this up. If you do work knowing you're not going to get paid, it's called pro bono. If you do work thinking you're going to get paid and you don't, it's called amateur bono.
Oh, that's funny.
And so, you know, the pay for the heart is that if you're laid off and you want some coaching, maybe $5 or $10 is really all that your heart says that you can pay. But if you're a CEO of a $10 million company and you want some help dealing with the stress in your company, that $5 or $10 wouldn't work for my heart. So, you know, because it's a matching of the energies and the available resources. So.
That's helpful. So for those of you who are hanging in there with us and here today, if you have any topics that you would love us to cover in these last 7 minutes of the call, or any questions that you have for Flip or me, please feel free to put those in the chat, any comments. I made this offer yesterday and no one took me up on it. I'll make the offer again today. Flip, I hope this is okay. Don't freak out. Yesterday I made the offer. If you're on the webinar and you'd like to come on camera, either with your face or just your voice, and talk to us about today's topics, you can use the hand raise function and I can bring you over the webinar wall to be a panelist with us. Yesterday, no one took me up on this offer. I'm offering it again. And I will note that Ronald seems to have his hand raised already. So I'm taking that as, you know, an inadvertent hand raise before, but if you are actually interested in coming over, it looks like John is wanting to come over. John, I'm going to promote you to panelist. This is my friend, John Saunders. And John, I don't see your camera. You're welcome to turn it on, or there you go. Welcome, John.
You're muted.
You'll need to unmute, yes.
All right, unmuted. In terms of hope for a better future, I had a friend point out something very interesting, which was, this is one of the first times when all of humanity pretty much has had a shared experience and we're all on the same side. It's not a war or anything like this. And so perhaps there is a hope that will result in a greater sense of shared humanity. So
that's helpful. Thank you, John. Flip, any thoughts?
Well, I do think that this is about common humanity, because this virus just said, you know what, you think you have borders, you think you have walls, sorry. Yeah. And it's fascinating to me that, to quote David Brooks from the New York Times, we had to be set apart to come together. Mm-hmm. And so this physical distancing, which is actually not social distancing, right, is creating opportunities. I've been calling people that I haven't talked to in a long time. I've been, going on LinkedIn and saying, hey, how's it going? With no expectation for business or anything else. It's just let's reinforce our common humanity and support each other.
Yeah.
And that probably is one thing that's helping you to stay sane and help you freak out in a positive way, that reconnection with friends and loved ones.
Yeah, because we all have stories now about both how we're moving through this and sometimes very poignant stories of people who we love who are struggling or have even passed from this particular virus. And it's all part of moving through life because, as another one of my mentors, David White, the poet and speaker, says, at some point we realize that either we're going to say goodbye to everybody we've ever known or they're going to say goodbye to us. And that makes the present precious. So it's an interesting shared experience because no one can really, unless you're an indigenous person out in the Amazon, no one can say that they haven't heard about this or that they haven't taken some action about this.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
sure. Yep.
Well, so we're just about out of time today. So John, thank you for joining us. Hopefully we will see you again. I'm going to send you back over the wall.
No worries.
And so for those of you who are interested in learning more from Flip, we are going to give you his email address and his website link in the chat. We also would encourage you to continue to invite friends to join this series. We have, just about 600 people on our daily distribution list. We would love to have more. And we do have events scheduled through May 1st with the caveat that I'm participating in a virtual book marketing event with Barrett Kohler Publishers on April 22nd and 23rd, I think. It's a Tuesday and a Wednesday. Maybe even next week. I've kind of lost track of the dates. So we will not have the daily connection on those dates, but otherwise we will be here daily through May 1st. We invite you to join our Facebook group. One of the things I've been doing in the Facebook group is pulling out old photos of myself with some of our guests. So we would love to have you join us over on Facebook. And I always welcome any inquiries anytime to my email, Becky@weavinginfluence.com, if there's a way that my team or I could serve you during the crisis. So, Flip, do you have any parting comments for our friends today?
Well, be sure to take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. And other than that, I would say rock on.
Take care. Happy Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.